Folks, welcome to the Freedom from the Press podcast. My name is Jason Robertson, and happy Friday. I am here with my partner in crime who's making me dizzy flipping our videos around. I'm here with...
Hey everyone, Todd Peterson. We are dancing on the screen right now, and good to have you with us today. And we are excited to dive into Ron DeSantis. We have a little bit of clickbait to bring you on the show here, but we're going to give him a fair shake, and you'll kind of get to understand where we're coming from by the end of this. So welcome aboard.
Yeah, and I got to say, sometimes we talk about like, hey, what are we going to do on Friday's podcast? And, you know, this week, and we're going to go over it in a sec, but we had the Ron DeSantis, Gavin Newsom debate last night, which was kind of exciting. But the spot I wanted to start was the breaking news that George Santos was kicked out of the House of Representatives. 2/3 of the members of the House had to vote to do that. Todd, what's your initial gut reaction on this?
I hate it, and it confirms everything we know about the establishment GOP at this point, Jason. Here you have a man who's right now facing some charges, some felony charges for various things. Fine, but how many elected officials in Washington, D.C. have done something illegal or done something stupid to warrant the same level of, repercussions? But here you are, Republicans are joining Democrats and voting to expel a Republican congressman right when they have the slimmest majority already. Biden is still in office. We haven't faced an impeachment. Mayorkas, go down the list of his cabinet members. Go down the list of Dan Goldman, who called for the extermination of Donald Trump just last week. Rashida Tlaib, who, if we're following the Democrat playbook, led an insurrection at the Capitol a couple of weeks ago. The list goes on and on. Maxine Waters is still in Congress after 40 years of goodness knows how many illegal operations, paying her daughter and whatnot. But sure, George Santos is going to go right away. So I hate it. I'm not surprised at all, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I have to say, we were trying to figure out how we were going to frame up this week's episode about Ron DeSantis. And we've done some episodes breaking down how the Republicans don't do anything, how the Democrats are corrupt, and the George Santos situation covers all those bases. And my take on it is, did George Santos deserve to be kicked out of the House of Representatives? Absolutely. Like, the evidence of his corruption warrants it. But if you look at the corrupt political establishment, George Santos, to me, doesn't even make the top 20 list of members of the House of Representatives we need to get rid of. I mean, you named off 10, any member of the squad. Maxine Waters, Nancy Pelosi. Just go down the stock trading list of all the members of the House of Representatives. Every single one of them should be removed from the House of Representatives. But out of all these people who've been in government for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, robbing the American people and not doing anything for us, who's the one guy they decide to go after but George Santos? And that, to me, frames up kind of where we're going to take the Ron DeSantis conversation. Because what I believe happens is that either you get somebody who's corrupt from the start who says, I'm going to go be part of politics. And we all see examples of that, and we all know examples of that. But I think the more common thing that happens is that somebody starts out with good intentions, with wanting to do the right thing. They get in Washington, D.C., and then if it's the intelligence communities or the lobbyists, they sink their claws into this naive person. And then all of a sudden, before you know it, they have taken this person who went to Washington, D.C. to do good things, and they've made them part of the corrupt machine. And I think we're going to present some evidence today. We're going to present some timelines. We're going to stay away from some of the stupid stuff. I know there's been a lot of slinging of mud between Trump and DeSantis campaigns, but we're just going to lay out a few timelines. And when Todd and I were going through it, it was funny because I've been following this, and when I was kind of laying it out to Todd, what was your reaction when you first looked at it?
Disappointment, Jason, if I'm being honest. So you and I both, we had flags in our offices, Trump, DeSantis, 2024. We were gung-ho. I mean, he was the best governor in America during the pandemic. His policies were strong. They followed the science. And he did some really great things in the culture wars, too, pushing back against some woke narratives, protecting kids in Florida. And we saw the results of that with an overwhelming re-election in 2022. And so DeSantis was saying all the right things, doing all the right things. And so you and I had bought into that. And then as you kind of laid out the timeline here, we're going to get into his operations with Disney specifically, with which I think most people are aware of, but then how he raised campaign funds for the reelection. And Jason, to your point about the establishment getting your claws into people, look, we like DeSantis a lot. At the end, I think he could be rehabilitated within MAGA. I would love to see that, but he has some explaining to do with where his money is coming from, and that's really what we want to get into today. I know if you're on Twitter, Jason and I are on Twitter a lot of the day. There's a lot of DeSantis simps out there that just say he's the perfect candidate, and the point of the show is that he is not perfect. We're going to expose some of the flaws. It doesn't mean we're anti-DeSantis necessarily, but we want to give the truth out to the viewing public too. And again, on the show, Jason, you and I are very fair in our attacks against Democrats, Republicans, right and left, just trying to get the truth out to people. Make that informed decision as you vote.
Yeah, and it's funny for any Star Wars nerds in the crowd, we liken what's happening to the Anakin Skywalker Darth Vader timeline, where Anakin was this young, naive kid and he got corrupted by the dark side and he became this evil Sith Lord. And at the end, there was a rehabilitation arc where he fought back against that. And that's really what we're hoping for DeSantis. And and hopefully exposing what happened educates people on where we see the corruption. You can just see it because Todd had mentioned, I followed Ron DeSantis for years. Many people don't know he served in the House of Representatives. He was there for a while. I became aware of him because he joined the Freedom Caucus, which is a caucus I like. And he also did cool things, like he didn't take lobbyist money. He slept in his office instead of getting a residence. I mean, all the things that I wanted to see from a member of the House to avoid the corruption. And also, they went through this period where he didn't really do anything. So he was there. He didn't get sucked into anything. He didn't accomplish much. Then he left and he went and he became governor of Florida in a historic race. Donald Trump endorsed him. He ended up winning by a slim margin. His political opponent turned out to be a crackhead who had gay orgies and got busted for that. And honestly, between DeSantis in the House, DeSantis in his first term of governor, DeSantis in his through COVID, I was a huge DeSantis fan. And it's funny, I used to have a flag on my wall, Trump DeSantis 2024. I thought DeSantis's biggest obstacle was how socially awkward he was, and I didn't know if he could carry that torch to be president. But I'm like, man, if you get President Trump in there to set the agenda, Ron to come behind him and do a lot of the policy stuff, a lot of the nitty gritty, we get the country turned around. We lay out a 12-year plan. After Trump leaves, then DeSantis is a shoo-in in 2028. And just, hey, guys, you like where the country's going? Let me take over. But then things went a little awry. And Todd, should we start with last night's debate between DeSantis and Newsom?
Yeah, that's fresh on our minds. And the only other thing, Jason, I wanted to add onto that too was not that long ago, DeSantis was called the mini Trump. He was basically Trump's policies, but a little bit more articulate and connective. Donald Trump has his way of speaking with people that resonates, and he cuts through a lot of the BS. DeSantis was a little bit more politically polished, and so people liked that, albeit the social awkwardness. That seems like a lifetime ago all of a sudden. And so, Jason, I'm going to set this up here. You and I last week had a prediction that Gavin Newsom was going to wipe the floor with DeSantis. We said Newsom is polished, he's slick, he's greasy. Gavin, he's a smooth politician. We hate his policies, but we can respect that he's really good at what he does. And then let's see how DeSantis did when he debated Charlie Crist last year, heading into that gubernatorial reelection.
Yes or no, Ron? Will you serve a full 4-year term if you're reelected governor of Florida? It's not a tough question. It's a fair question. He won't tell you.
We did not agree on the candidates asking each other questions. Governor, it's your turn.
Okay, so that's the Ron DeSantis we expected to show up last night. Just awkward, uncomfortable. He knew he knew how he wanted to answer the question. He knew what the answer was to that question, but just avoided it. And he was super awkward in that exchange. So that's what we thought we would get last night. But Jason, what were your thoughts on the debate?
It was interesting. I will say this. When I was watching Newsom and DeSantis, I don't think either one will be president in my lifetime. Neither one did great. I will say this was the high point of the DeSantis campaign so far. He answered questions well. It was set up and he did as well. He did much better than I expected. Now, in looking back on it and after sleeping on it for a night, I looked at, okay, one, he was on Hannity. Two, all the questions he asked were things in Ron's wheelhouse. And if you even pay attention to how he asked the questions, it's like, let me show a graph that shows how much better Florida is than California. Now, gentlemen, let's talk about this. And so it was the easiest debate in the history of debates for Ron DeSantis. And granted, California has a lot of things wrong, so it couldn't be like there couldn't be a bigger contrast. And we can all agree we want America to be more like Florida than California. But just the way he set up those questions, it's like, Gavin, how do you want to defend this horrible number? And Ron, by the way, tell us why you got this great number. And it was even interesting in the abortion question because it was near the end of the debate, and that's always a stumbling block. And for Newsom, Hannity asked like 3 times, so you're saying they can kill babies in the 8th or 9th month? Is that what you're saying? We shouldn't ban killing? I mean, so a very slanted question. And meanwhile, it rolls over to DeSantis, and it's, so what do you explain your abortion position? Not anything slanted. So I think the Republican establishment, with Sean Hannity and Fox News is a part of, they set up the T for the T-ball game for Ron DeSantis and said, take this home. I'm even convinced they gave him the questions, because if you see when he answered the questions, he has all the pieces of paper in his pocket to talk about his points. So I think that was a commercial. I will give Gavin Newsom credit for showing up for it, because that was the most hostile of territories. And I hate Gavin Newsom. He's greasy, he's slimy, but took a set of stones to go for that. But honestly, for how easy it was set up for Ron, I expected a home run, and I thought he hit a double. But my expectations were, like you showed in the Charlie Crist debate, where he's standing there looking all silly and can't answer a question, that kind of things.
Yeah, and Jason, the other thought on Newsom, too, I think we've reached the point where Democrats simply cannot defend their policies. And I know you mentioned it was slanted. It absolutely was. It was in Fox's house. It had Hannity. I mean, it was geared towards the Republican audience, make Newsom look bad. But we expected him to be able to defend what he's doing. He got pushed on COVID, crime, abortion, people leaving, school closures. He wasn't able to address anything. The disgustingness of San Francisco, we have a short clip on that one we'll get to in a second here. Newsom had nothing in terms of speaking positively about his policies. The best he could do was deflect or start to go to that emotive route where he said Ron DeSantis is being mean because he doesn't think kids should be able to cross state lines without their parents' permission to change their bodies. And so that's the best Newsom had to offer in that debate last night. And I hope viewers are taking away the fact that we've reached a point now where you can't defend what Democrats are doing. And look, we're against Republican establishment. That is clear. We're going to go through that the entire show today. I think we do that every week. But I hope it wakes people up to say, how on God's green earth can you look at the Democrat Party right now and say, this is what's good and this is what's right?
Yeah, I got to say that's actually a very important takeaway, not just how good Ron did, but if you look at what the election should look like, Democrats can't defend any policy. And I think that's where it's difficult for any of us. Like, we just need to unite behind a candidate, and we need to move forward, because putting Joe Biden, who is much less smooth than Gavin Newsom, in front of the American people to defend his policies, like, that's just not going to work out well for the Democrats.
All right, Jason, what do you think? Should we show some highlights here, and then we'll get into our highlights, and then we'll get into let's be friendly to Ron here, and then we'll start getting a little nitty gritty here.
So I was talking to a fella who had made the move from California to Florida, and he was telling me that Florida is much better governed, safer, better budget, lower taxes, all this stuff. And he was really happy with the quality of life. And then he paused and he said, by the way, I'm Gavin Newsom's father-in-law. So we do count Gavin's in-laws as some of the people that have fled California and come to the state of Florida.
All right. Love that one here. Gavin's got nothing, and he smiles right away because, in his head, he's thinking, oh, shoot, I know where this is going. So That was a great moment by DeSantis here. Jason, I'm just going to do rapid fire here, get some Ron highlights.
Let's go for him.
Let's
give him the highlights. Give him the love.
He needs it. This is a map of San Francisco. There's a lot of plots on that. You may be asking, what is that plotting? Well, this is an app where they plot the human feces that are found on the streets of San Francisco. And you see how almost the whole thing is covered, because that is...
Good. You know what, Jason? We want our side to win. We want conservative values to prevail. I am glad Newsom and Democrats, right now they're proxies, DeSantis and Newsom, but I'm glad our side is exposing Democrats. Again, people leaving. You got the maps here. Let's go to something else as well.
I had Disney open during COVID, and we made them a fortune, and we saved a lot of jobs. You had Disney closed inexplicably for over a year. You were not following science. You were a lockdown governor. You did a lot of damage to your people. You had more kids locked out of school for a longer period of time in California than anywhere else in the country. It was the...
All right, that's solid. We got one more.
When I was in the Navy, I got orders to go to Naval Amphibious Base Coronado in Southern California. And I was a lifelong Floridian, but I went there and I was like, man, this is one of the most beautiful places on earth. And I think California has more natural advantages than any state in the country. You almost have to try to mess California up. And yeah, that's what Gavin Newsom has done since he's been governor. He's the first governor to ever lose population. They actually, at one point, ran out of U-Hauls in the state.
All right, folks. So we can all agree Ron DeSantis had some good performing moments. He exposed Democrat nonsense. And this is what we loved about Ron DeSantis. And full disclosure, like I said, both Todd and I, it was funny because I started going on the Wayne Dupree podcast as a co-host. And when I started on the podcast, I had my Trump DeSantis flag. And I'm like, I'm all in. Trump DeSantis, 12-year reign. Let's take the country back. And they said, just watch, never fall in love with politicians because they always turn corrupt. And I said, well, what are you talking about? And they said, just pay attention. So we're going to start with the first, one of the first big things that Ron did other than COVID that everybody got behind, and that was Disney. Todd, how do you want to kick off the Disney story?
Yeah, well, I mean, DeSantis was the conservative culture warrior in America, and he had the position of authority to actually enact some meaningful change. So DeSantis, like Trump, does a really great job of reading the room, and he understood what the winds were blowing and what direction they were blowing in terms of parental rights and protecting kids. And so this was a couple years ago, if you'll recall, then we had the Don't Say Gay bill, which, Jason, if you read the entire bill, it doesn't mention anything about any of that. Facebook fact check us. It doesn't say anything about Don't Say Gay, but that was the leftist attack on this bill that simply said, if you're between the ages of kindergarten and third grade, you as a student are not going to be exposed to LGBTQ propaganda in the classroom. You can have those conversations at home. You can have them with family and friends. But if you are in a government school, you're not going to be exposed to that. You're here to learn basic arithmetic, reading, writing, everything that kids need and nothing else. And so Disney, the big mega house in Florida, Orlando, they've got everything. Disney decided to make a public stand, and you had then CEO Bob Chapek publicly denounce the Don't Say Gay bill. And if anyone in this audience has kids or grandkids and you've seen a Disney movie recently, you will be aware that there's a lot of propaganda in those films. It's not like the Disney animated classics of old where you just had a love story with a princess and a prince and a happy ending. Now you've got to promote the agenda. And so Disney CEO went all in and said, Ron, I don't like what you're doing, basically. Political stance, public stance. And then Ron DeSantis says, buddy, not in my state.
Yeah, and it's fascinating. So as you look at the timeline for those who are watching, March 2022, Disney, they passed the Parental Rights, whatever it was called, Act that got branded as Don't Say Gay. Disney comes out and speaks against it. Ron DeSantis fires back, starts legislation saying, because Disney, most people don't know, it's almost like a foreign country in Florida where they have their own government, they have their own tax breaks, they get to make all their decisions. It's really a fascinating deal, and it's called the Reedy Creek District. And so Ron DeSantis did what I considered was a ballsy MAGA move. April 22, he passes legislation that shuts down Reedy Creek. What that means is Disney lost all its special privileges. Disney lost all its own exclusions, all of its. I mean, they have their own police force, for God's sakes. He eliminated all of that. So April 2022, if you ask me, I am like, hell yeah, Ron DeSantis. He just blew up Disney, which is a baller move, something we should actually talk about. Now, in the bill, he said there'll be a transition period, and these changes won't take effect till 2023. But Todd, April 2022, how stoked were you about Ron DeSantis?
I think this is peak DeSantis. This is when the flags were in our offices, Jason. I think this is when you and I looked at each other and said, boy, DeSantis Trump is going to be a strong ticket, because you've got Trump's 4 years in the White House that we all miss. And then you've got up and coming DeSantis, who is just Mr. Culture Warrior. And I think that's what conservatives really care about. We want the tax stuff. We want the government out of our lives, but we are very passionate about protecting our kids and our communities and our families. And Democrats have weaponized the government against our culture. And so this was a huge step in the right direction. So you got the year grace period to go into effect. Everyone's thinking, okay, we're moving in the right direction. So table it for a second. But Jason, I would argue that his reelection in November of 22, next on our timeline here, a big part of that was sure the COVID policies, but more so was the culture war that he fought against Disney and protecting kids and going after, there were some other things I don't want to get into it on Facebook necessarily, but again, fighting that woke culture war. And that was really popular in the state of Florida. It's popular among independents and nonpartisans. They just want to be left alone.
Well, and I got to say, in the back of my head, when I saw him going after Disney and just doing away with this agreement, I'm like, holy cow, that's the dude we need in government, blowing up all these government institutions. Because at this point, we saw the corruption. We knew we needed to overhaul things. And what an anti-donor position. Are you kidding me? You're going to go after Disney, who's one of the biggest donors in Florida and worldwide. Like I say, April 2022 to November, it was peak. This was a baller move. This is one of the things that put DeSantis on. And then, like Todd mentioned, he won re-election in November 22 by one of the largest margins ever of a governor in the history.
And let me recap that really fast, Jason. So 2016, he ekes out a victory by less than 1%. I think it was like 49.9 to maybe 49.7 or something ridiculous against his Dem opponent. This time around, he wins 60-40. It wasn't even close. And so, again, yes, some of that might have been COVID policy. It might have been people moving in for a little more freedom in Florida. But again, I think it's all this culture war that he was fighting so aggressively and on the right side.
So then all of a sudden you get into December and Disney stuff drops out of the headlines. And like some of the guys that I know in politics are like, watch out for Ron. Something was snaky in his reelection. And we'll talk about the finances here in a minute. But all of a sudden, quietly, December 2022, the Florida legislature decides to reverse the dissolution that they passed in April 2022. And they start talking about new legislation. Maybe we don't want to roll back all this stuff. Maybe we don't want to do away with Reedy Creek District. Wasn't really covered. There were some lawsuits going back and forth. And all of a sudden, my dauber went up and said, well, this is weird. Then in February 2023, they passed new legislation. So this legislation was, one, Reedy Creek gets dissolved, but a new organization gets started with all the same privileges. So all that stuff they said they were going to get rid of for Disney, all of a sudden stays in place. It exists under a new name. But they said, in order to make sure Disney doesn't do anything stupid, we're going to create a 5-member board to oversee the Reedy Creek District. And just so there's no corruption, it's going to be an unpaid position. So people are going to do this oversight board for free. And then Ron DeSantis starts promoting his donors or people affiliated with his donors to this board. Now, you might say, well, that's weird. And if you look at the people on the board, they're all DeSantis supporters. They're people that either gave to the campaign or indirectly gave to the campaign. But what's fascinating is all those people run businesses for the most part, and they get to decide where Disney spends its money. So if you're going to build a building, if you're going to build a road, if you're going to install something, that board ultimately decides who gets the money. And Todd, do you think that board might steer any of that money to their own interests?
I would say the chances are pretty high, Jason.
I mean,
that worked out very well for them. I think my favorite, though, the wife of the head of the Republican Party in Florida is one of the 5 on the board.
Right.
Oh, you want to talk qualifications? I'm connected to DeSantis because my husband is connected to DeSantis.
Yeah. So if you think of the criticism everybody has of the Republican Party, and if you think of, we talked earlier about the establishment or the rhinos or the swamp, this was the definition of a swamp move. Like, we do a MAGA move, which is we're going to dissolve Disney. Like, boom, we're going to take them out. And it was spectacular. And then all of a sudden, as soon as we get reelected, we're going to drop all our donors in a position of power to decide where Disney's going to spend their billions of dollars. And if that isn't the swamp, please, somebody tell me this. And honestly, the chat's super active today. Really excited to see folks on there. And people are like, I'm voting for Ron DeSantis. Like, great, we love you. Defend this action then. Then hop in the comments and tell me why you think it was good that rather than dissolving Reedy Creek, he set up 5 board positions that he put his big donors on. And explain to me how that doesn't raise a concern at your point that maybe this guy is just going to be another establishment politician who, this isn't going to be a continuation of the same.
Hey, Jason, permission to jump in for a second.
Go for it.
And again, welcome aboard, DeSantis supporters. At the end of the day, we're on the same team here because we want to put America first. So this is really getting into the weeds about just making sure that everyone's aware of what's going on here. But I do just want to make the point, because this comes up in a lot of my debates and conversations, that people are going to push back and say, yeah, but Trump. Okay, yeah, but Trump does this, or Trump does the same thing, or Trump does it 10 times worse. I just need to point out that that is no longer an argument, because now what we're saying is Ron DeSantis does the exact same thing. So you can't say I'm opposed to Trump because he curries favors from friends, or his friends curry favor from him. That's clearly not the issue anymore. You need to find another reason to not like Trump, because what you're saying is you support Ron DeSantis even though he does the exact same thing. So if we want to have a debate about politicians and who's better, who's worse, and again, no one is perfect. We're flawed individuals, especially politicians. They're all flawed and corrupt. You need to come to the table with a stronger argument than, yeah, but Trump, because you're accepting a level of corruption across the board for your guy all of a sudden. So it's just something else. It's not Trump. I just got to put that out there. Like, let's have a real debate about which politician is better or worse for the movement then.
And where I want to extrapolate this to, folks, and this is the importance, whoever goes to DC, we want them to blow up some of these federal agencies. Not literally, for those on Facebook, don't think we're saying terroristic things. We want them to shut them down. We want them to stop the weaponization. But if you see the Disney timeline, what's been reported, it sounds like Ron has that on his resume, when in fact, he made the swampiest of swamp moves by stopping, like, the legislation passed to dissolve Reedy Creek. He just needed to let it take effect, and he didn't. He put his own political operatives in the position of Disney. And here's the scary thing, folks, that we have to think about, and this is where it ties into the Patriot Act. When they started the Patriot Act way back when, after 9/11, especially those on the right, were all like, yeah, let's do that. Let's give all this power to these federal agencies.
I have nothing to hide. Yep.
Right. I got nothing to hide. All that kind of thing. But all of a sudden, that power, when given to the government, got redirected at American citizens, specifically people that are Trump supporters or people on the right. And so this is troubling for me, that you won the battle. You won. And then you back down and you put your donors in. And now if you look, like, there's court battles and all that stuff. So it wasn't a win. Disney didn't go away. There's just 5 Ron DeSantis donors or supporters that are currently overseeing it. And this just in, folks, someday Florida will have a Democrat governor. And then what's going to happen to that board? All of a sudden, it's going to be full with the Democrat governor's folks. And then all the battles that we fought for, we've now given back. Ridiculous.
It's weird how Republicans win and then backtrack. Have you ever seen a Democrat concede any victories?
No. Like, it never happens in the history of the world. It's crazy. So
yeah,
so anyways,
so Jason, here we are too, the kind of bookending our timeline here. The very last thing is that you now have Democrat legislators proposing to return to the original agreement. I wouldn't be surprised if in the near future, it's almost as if this never even happened. We might go back to square one and Disney gets its original autonomy, all the benefits, all the privileges. It'll be like this never happened. And then that's the Republicans for you. Then they can argue, they can fight against Disney again and rile up the voters.
Right. Yeah. And once again, we had a win on the board and we voluntarily took a win off the board, which is just like George Santos. It was just like our episode a couple weeks ago when we talked about do nothing Republicans. So it's crazy. But with that, Todd, should we go pay some bills quick?
Yeah, we got to do this, unfortunately, but it's time to pay the bills. Jason, keep the lights on.
On the backside, it's going to be follow the money time, folks. Follow.
All right, you're going to want to stay tuned. We'll catch you in a few.
My Towels solved a problem that we've all had with towels. You go into the stores and they feel lotiony and soft, but then you get them home and they wind dry you. That's why I made My Towels. They actually work, they're soft, and they absorb. And now I'm excited to announce 2 brand new lines of My Towels. What makes them the best towels ever is they're now made with 100% long staple Shapir cotton. This is a combed ring spun cotton that makes My Towels even softer and more absorbent than ever. And now you get a 6-piece set for an amazing introductory sale price as low as $29.98. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to get My Towels for only $29.98. Or you can get my designer premium line for just $20 more. Either way, you save 50% now on all My Towels. They actually work. What a concept. This offer won't last long, so please order now.
MyPillow.com. Hey, happy day, everybody. Thank you for your generous support this year for Split Rock Coffee. I just want to come to you real quick and talk to you about a couple of things. One of it is our Coffee with Purpose program. You know, that part of those profits go back to supporting our disabled veterans, our children, our families, organizations, Fishing for Life, Air Power, those types of things. Not only do you get a great cup of coffee, but I got to tell you, folks, it's a great mission that we're on. And we have light, medium, and dark, and it's in whole bean or ground. Now, here's a couple of samples of our ground product. This is a light and a dark, and there's a medium also. If you go to our website, splitrockcoffee.com, and all of our products are there, and take a few minutes, look around, leave us your comments, please. And today we've got a special. As you check out, you can use your promo code at splitrockcoffee.com, TODD10, TODD10, folks. TODD10 today, 10% off, and get on it right away because we're selling fast for fourth quarter. Christmas and the holidays is coming up, folks. Thank you again. SplitRockCoffee.com. Use your promo code TODD10. Thank you so much.
Hey, folks. I got to say, Todd and I are both supporters of Split Rock Coffee and My Pillow. My favorite My Pillow product, Todd, it's got to be the towels, I got to say. Towels are fun.
And I am partial to slippers. We're up here in Minnesota. I'm too cheap to get the house heated up, so I got to have something on my feet. And Jason, I don't know if you know this, but I am that Todd 10.
You are that Todd 10. That's how you know you've made it, when you get your own promo code. So shout out to Split Rock Coffee. Hey, folks, I just want to jump into a couple of the comments here, too, and just appreciate people participating. So you've got Karen Taylor. Love Ron DeSantis. He would make a great president. Karen Taylor, if you're looking right before his election, I would have 1,000% agreed with you. And hopefully, when we present some of this information, you're going to go, well, this is odd, and really wonder about the like what it really means. Another great comment I saw is from Harry. Ron DeSantis is the best governor in the U.S. Fact check, true. I hope he doesn't get caught up in the screwed up D.C. mess. Look at the cocaine in the White House, Joe Child Sniffer Biden. We might not be able to read all that stuff. But anyways, it's like Harry, we agree. And what we're trying to lay out is right now the indications are that Ron DeSantis is getting sucked into the DC mess. That was the whole Disney timeline. And then I think Carol Rufio summed it up. It's all about the Benjamins and the wrong runs. All politicians are corrupt, aren't they? That's kind of the point we're getting to, is you can have these great sound bites like the Newsom DeSantis thing. You can have these Republicans that are, we're going to go fight for you. We're going to do that. But then when we give Republicans power, they don't want it. They're not going to do it. It's going to upset their donors. And that's really the entire timeline that hopefully we laid out to you in Disney. And like I say, I would love for people in the comments, like if you disagree with that, like let us know. Say, no, we're okay that Ron DeSantis appointed his donors to oversee Disney. And we're okay that he set it up where now all of a sudden he can put, like the Democrats can put their own donors in charge. And no, we like that. That was a great decision. Like that's who we want in charge of the country and doing things. Whereas for me, that was kind of the first, wait a second, I might be sold a bill of goods. This might just be another Republican that we're going to fight for and support, and they're going to end up not taking care of me. And actually, we have Lady Liberty over on Rumble. Sorry, I can't share it on the screen. Lady Liberty nailed it. She said, Republicans are just like the Minnesota Vikings. They get your hopes up for a win only to fail at the very end. As a Vikings fan my whole life, as somebody who grew up in Minnesota, I could not agree more, because like you send these people in, and I flash back to when I remember we had Trey Gowdy and he was having those hearings, and Jason Chaffetz and all the young guns, and they were going to take back the Republican
Tea Party. Yeah.
Yeah, Tea Party. And then Todd, what happened to all those guys? Paul Ryan, like all
Where
those
did the Tea Party go? They came in 2010 on a huge wave, and I'll be honest, I think they were gone by 2012, Jason. I think the swamp ate them all up.
Right. Yeah, and actually going through the comments, great engagement from the audience today, folks. But Harold hits it on the head. Hey, Republicans, when I think of Benedict Arnold, I'll think about all the Republicans who can't impeach Mayorkas or bring Joe Biden up for impeachment, because Republicans are cowards who go along with Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar, AOC, and other communist sympathizers. This is our point, is the establishment Republican Party is not going to help you out. And then one last comment, and we'll move into Follow the Money. Cameron, thanks for chiming in. DeSantis is a Navy SEAL and wants the best for our country. It's not a party. Well, just so you know, so question, Cameron, do you know what Ron's job was in the Navy? Todd, do you know what it was?
I actually don't. I hate it when you put me on the spot like that.
Yeah. Yeah. hop in, Cameron. Do you know what Ron DeSantis did in the Navy? He wasn't a Navy SEAL. He was a Navy lawyer. Yeah, Cameron got it right. But he paints it up like he was like storming the beaches of Iraq. No, he was a lawyer. Like, and don't get me wrong, like we love all members of the military service, but it's just not the same thing. The
T-Rex was a hero in Jurassic Park.
Yeah, exactly.
One quick counter argument here, and I haven't seen it in the comments necessarily, but again, we're exploring all the ideas. The one pushback I might say to him appointing his donors and loyalists, and this kind of goes into the George Santos fiasco as well, there's only one move moving forward, and that's fighting fire with fire. And so if the options for DeSantis are to appoint an impartial board, let's say, I mean, it'd be better just to dissolve the entire operation. I think that's what you and I were landing on when we said, don't give back ground after you get a victory, like just do it all. But if he's going to walk it back a little bit and think he has control, I'd rather 5 Republicans are on that board than independent-minded folks or, secret liberals, kind of like we saw in the Derek Chauvin jury trial, right? All these guys that said that I'm an impartial jury, and they turns out they support the BLM movement. That's the only pushback. Now, to be clear, don't have any Reedy Creek organization. Get rid of it. Disney's a corporation that doesn't deserve any benefits. But if you are, I'm meeting our viewers in the middle here. If you are, I think that might be the only play moving forward, because it's either 5 Republicans or it's 5 people that you're going to battle with over and over again. But
understand the way they set up this legislation, if and when a Democrat wins governorship again, because every state's flip all the time. One of the first courses of action that they're going to do is they're going to impart their donors. And I have to say, if you look at this, so Ron DeSantis, you can only run for 2 terms as governor. So his term will be up at the end of this term. But the flip side is that you're going to run and you're going to be able to solicit donors saying, I can put you on this board so that you control where Disney gets to spend its money.
Mhm.
And like I say, it's interesting because we have a lot of people dropping comments about, hey, I love Ron DeSantis, but nobody can defend his backtracking and setting up a board of donors. And like
Yeah.
I say, that might not be enough reason for you to say, you can still love DeSantis, but that is swamp behavior. That is what we've seen from Republicans my entire life. We have a win, we give it back. We fundraise off it, we talk about it, and half the time you don't even know they gave it back. But speaking of fundraising, Todd,
We've got to get into this here. This is, look, if you're a DeSantis fan, give us 20 minutes here. You might still be a DeSantis fan on the other side, but at least now you've got all the facts that, again, when Jason shared this with me a week ago, wasn't on my radar. I knew some of the numbers we're going to share. I knew the process. We certainly know how the midterms turned out with establishment funding. But again, I think the word that summarized my reaction was disappointment, because we had Ron on a pedestal, and we know what happens when you put a politician on a pedestal.
Yeah. And actually, I think we do have a fact wrong on our timeline in February 2023. So I'll get to that. But Todd, pull up the graphic of the money.
Follow the money.
Always follow the money. Folks, write that down. If you don't learn anything else from me today on the podcast, always follow the money. So if you look at the money, here's what we're talking about. So in the midterm, we anticipated a red wave. That was what everybody was gearing up for. And we all know political donations are what drive spending. And I found this graph, and this showed a few things. First, you'll see that Democrats raised about $1.8 billion, and this is the National Committee. Republicans raised over $2 billion. That's the National Committee. Now, if you look, we make the argument that Republicans are all about fundraising. They want headlines. They want hearings where they can do sound clips to fundraise off. They don't want to actually impeach. So if Mayorkas ever gets brought up for impeachment, he won't be impeached, but you're going to get emails and texts about donate to the Republican Party. One thing I found fascinating on this graph is if you look at how much money Republicans spend of the money they get on donations, they spend half a billion dollars reinvesting in gathering more donations. So aside from DeSantis, if you look at the Republican machine, it is all about getting your donations. It is not about moving the needle forward. Todd, any thoughts on that?
I see $500 million of fun parties hosted by Ronna McDaniels. So you're going to the swanky 5-star resorts. You're getting the nicest meals, all these fun events. You're dressing up and looking nice and rubbing elbows with all the other people that donate money. But how do the 2022 midterms work out? $500 million to rub elbows and hobnob.
Right. And so we can all agree, and Rona must go, which we'll actually circle back to at the end, which is kind of a funny moment. But the other thing is, if you think, okay, so the Republicans for their national elections, and this is for all your House elections, all your Senate elections, they had $2 billion. So if you look at where the money goes, $2 billion, that's great. Now, I started looking into Ron DeSantis' campaign, and Todd and I were talking about this. Ron DeSantis was never in danger of losing that election. Like, the guy could have won a landslide. He could have spent zero money on his election. So take a guess. Put your guess in the comments, folks. How much money came in nationally for Ron DeSantis? These aren't just Florida people. These are big money donors giving him money. Understanding that on the national level, it was $2 billion. 10% of that, and it wasn't from the RNC, but he raised $200 million for his reelection, and that was big money donors, all your PAC people, all those people we hate that have bought the Republican Party. They shifted $200 million to Ron DeSantis.
And Jason, when he crossed the six-figure, when he got 100 million, they made a big deal out of that. And let's put that in perspective. His opponent, Charlie Crist, raised a total of $31 million. Number one, DeSantis wasn't going anywhere. Number two, that's 6 or 7 times larger than what his opponent raised. It doesn't add up if you just look at the numbers until you start to realize where that money was coming from and why it was going to DeSantis.
Yeah, so if you look at the timeline for those who are watching the video, April 22, he sets up the Friends of Ron DeSantis PAC, and they set it up to where it can be transferred to the never back down.
Jason, let me expand on that a little bit. The Friends of Ron DeSantis PAC, that was for Ron's gubernatorial re-election campaign. Now, there are laws in place that if you raise money to run for governor, you can't just spend that money on a federal election all of a sudden. But there's a gray area. Politicians aren't going to write a law that, boxes them into some never can do situation. And so even though there are laws on the books that says technically you can't use that money to run for that election now because you raised it for X, there was the Never Back Down Super PAC. And Jason, I don't know if we have time to get into PACs versus Super PACs on this show. That might be a fun episode as a standalone here. But you have the Friends of Ron DeSantis PAC that eventually sends, again, he raised $200 million, whatever wasn't spent, gets sent over to the Never Back Down Super PAC, which was designed for Ron's presidential election. And so with a magic accounting maneuver, you have all this governor money getting spent into the president money treasure chest, and now you see Ron DeSantis sitting on half of his fundraising goal before he even announces.
Right. So when you think back to yourself for when you are going to, when did they start sinking the claws in? April 22, when he established his gubernatorial reelection campaign, he set it up where it could all be moved to a presidential campaign. And then they funded all these big money donors, which are all the people we hate, all the people that buy Republican politicians. They gave him $200 million on a race that was never in question. Then what's the next point on the timeline, Todd?
All right, this is where we've gone into this before here. We'll spend a little time here. 2022 midterms. Let's recap that really fast. Mitch McConnell gets a lot of heat for this, but let's just put it on the entire establishment GOP. Pulls funding from MAGA candidates in really close races around the country. And so we had Alaska, where you had a runoff situation with a Trump-backed Republican and the establishment Republican. Guess who wins that race in a really tight margin once funding gets pulled from Kelly Topeka, the Trump-backed candidate? Nevada had Adam Laxalt go against an up-and-coming Democrat. Again, Mitch McConnell pulled funding from that race. Establishments pulled funding from Nevada. That was a swing state that could have gone to given the GOP the Senate majority. Same thing in Arizona. You had Blake Masters running a tight race. Even got the Libertarian backing, right? So you had that 1% to 2% that might have pushed him over the edge. Nope. All the funding got pulled from Arizona as well. Pennsylvania, that had Trump's candidate Oz in the race against now Fetterman, who is somehow a U.S. senator. All these close races around the country, the GOP really should have had the Senate majority. You had the very unpopular Joe Biden in the White House. Every midterm, you see these swings. Somehow it didn't happen. We're popping it up on the chart for a reason. All of the establishment money went to Ron DeSantis, establishment candidates. The GOP did not want MAGA movement to win in 2022. And you can kind of see that lining up here. You've seen the noise on the headlines. They don't want Trump to win in 2024. This is their guy that they thought they might be able to undo the Trump movement and get their own person under the guise of MAGA back in the White House.
Right. And so if you look at it, you can see the money start to go in, and you see the claws start to sink in. And isn't it ironic that after they start sending him hundreds of millions of dollars for his presidential campaign, suddenly he changes his stance on Disney? And it's like, whoa. This is, for me, that was kind of an interesting thing. And then all of a sudden things start getting even more weird, because November, all of a sudden Ron DeSantis releases a book talking about his policies. He starts kind of talking about the Trump rules, right? Or like his relationship with Trump. And then he launches a nationwide book tour. Todd, what did you think about the book tour?
Jason, I thought I followed politics closely until you said he was on a nationwide book tour. I didn't know Ron DeSantis was on a nationwide book tour. It just wasn't on my radar. I didn't even know he had a book out.
And here's what's funny, folks. Where do you think that book tour was? Iowa, New Hampshire. There were a few, and then big money donor states. So he's all of a sudden hosting these dinners, and he's with all these big money donors as part of his book tour. But anyways, so it's like, okay, this is getting really weird. And for those of us who follow this really closely, like Todd, who follows it pretty closely, like he even missed that. Like, why Ron DeSantis traveling around the nation, giving these speeches, having these high money donation events, all that kind of stuff. But there was, and so everybody was asking him, and we showed the clip earlier where Charlie Crist asked if he would serve his gubernatorial thing. And if you go back and actually, let's play that video one more time, Todd. So This is in the re-election. This is after Ron has set up the PAC, after everybody's agreed to give him the hundreds of millions of dollars. Charlie Crist asked the question that should be on all Floridians. You had a right to know this. Ron, are you?
Yes or no, Ron? Will you serve a full 4-year term if you're reelected governor of Florida? It's not a tough question. It's a fair question. He won't tell you.
We did not agree on the candidates asking each other questions. Governor, it's your turn.
Watch Ron DeSantis' face. That is a man who's lying. That is a man who knows he's already set up all the machinations to run for re-election or to run for president. It's already in the works. He's already collecting money. He's already scheduling his book tour. That man is lying. And you can
Jason,
see it on his face.
I'm a simple man. I don't know the answer to this question. Maybe you do. I don't know who moderated that debate, but would it be in the purview of those moderators to maybe ask the question themselves? So, okay, Charlie Crist, great question. We have that in the lineup here. What are the odds that the DeSantis campaign said you will absolutely not ask this question in this debate?
Actually, if you rewatch the clip, she addresses that. They actually had to approve a list of questions for the debate. And if you hear her say, she says, that was not on the list of approved topics. So Ron DeSantis, if you're from Florida, that should just piss you off. Like you knew you were doing this. Now, another thing I want to talk about, we don't have the graphic for it, is Florida had a resign to run law. And this was interesting because Todd hadn't really heard about this. And even when he first saw it, like Todd, you're like, oh, this isn't a big deal. I
misunderstood it. Yeah.
What's that?
Yeah, I was going to say I misunderstood. And by the way, I am the proxy for every Ron DeSantis supporter watching our show, listening to our show. I want you to be on the same journey as I was to say, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. I didn't know that. A little deflating.
Right. So Florida had a law that's called resign to run. And it says any officer may not qualify as a candidate for another state, district, county, municipal, public office if the terms or part of that term would overlap with each other. There's a 3-page law. We can drop the link if you're curious. But basically it means if you are going to run for a national office. So let's say you're governor of Florida and you're going to run for president. Before you can declare that you're going to run for president, you need to sign a resignation letter. The resignation letter is effective the date of when the new job you're auditioning for or running for would take effect. So in this case, January 2025, Ron would still have years left on his gubernatorial term. But before he declared for president, he would have to say, I'm running for president. Here's my resignation letter. I'll remain governor until January 2025. And there's no backsies. There is no rescinding that resignation, which this is when it gets reported in the media. Ron DeSantis simps are like, oh, it's not that bad because he can always rescind his resignation. No. In the law, it says if you want to run, you have to resign. So if Ron was doing this right, you can see when he was getting reelected, he was going to be running for president. He was waiting to declare. He was building the machine. He was collecting the money. Almost immediately after his reelection, he should have said, hey, first he should have told you in his reelection. Then he should have said, hey, here's my resignation letter. I'm running for president. February 2023, Florida legislature starts, and this is where our graphic was a little wrong, starts talking about we need to remove the resign to run law. And you're like, wait a second. So you're saying a non-corrupt governor is like, is he going to live by his own laws or is he going to try to change the laws? Well, here you have your answer. Florida legislature starts in February 2023 saying we need to change the resign to run laws. And actually May 2023, May 14th, if I have the date right, Ron DeSantis signed into law removing the resign to run law, which means you can be an absentee governor. You can run for higher office. And I mean, if I'm a resident of Florida and seeing Ron all over the world, I'm pissed. Like, why is my governor not in my state? And then the day he signed that law, he did his announcements on Twitter that he was running for president. So between Disney, the finance stuff, the resign to run law, I am seeing huge red flags personally about his ability to not get sucked into the swamp, his ability to actually follow through and take wins, and his ability to actually drive changes. And I think that's kind of where I landed. If Ron didn't do any of that stuff, and that's why I used the Star Wars reference earlier, like we had him on a hero arc, and then you can just see when the big money and the swamp and the corruption got their claws into him.
And Jason, just a step further, it didn't fit in the text on the timeline there. If we can drop the link on where we have all of our sources here, but in addition to kind of changing that resign to run law, he also enabled that he didn't have to report all the visitors to the governor's mansion. He didn't necessarily have to report how state money was getting spent on travel. And so if you're a resident in the state of Florida, you no longer necessarily know who's visiting the mansion and for what purpose. And you don't know if your tax dollars are sending him on a private jet around the world to now campaign for president. And look, I love the 3-week House showdown. I would love to not have Tim Walz in the governor's eye. Let Walz travel the world as far as I'm concerned up here in Minnesota and not do anything. So I'm not sad to see a politician leave for a little bit and nothing changes. However, that's not what you signed up for when you elected DeSantis. And that's certainly not one of the reasons you're saying right now, like why I support him too. So just understand where he is, what he's doing, but you didn't agree to any of that. And he's changing it all on the fly to kind of meet his needs.
Right. Well, and like I say, in this, and it's funny, just to clean up some comments here, I won't be able to pronounce your first name, Rogelio. Donors to DeSantis help the Republican Party? No, they don't. That went to Ron DeSantis. Donors.
I went to the Never Back Down Super PAC and Friends of DeSantis PAC, unfortunately. And honestly, do we want to send our money to the RNC? I don't know why anyone donates to the Republican Party at this point.
No.
What does that get you?
I wouldn't. But the point is, had that money gone, theoretically, they could have spent it on races to win. And Brenda brings up a good point, too. You guys are a joke, so it's all right for Democrats to make new voting laws, not a Republican to change a little one. I suppose you think Hunter Biden is innocent of all his corruption and his sick daddy. Brenda, if you're making those comments, you haven't paid attention to our podcast. We call out people on the right and the left. We hate the establishment, whether you're Republican or a Democrat. And what we're saying is, if you think back to when we gave Republicans power, Trump went into office in 2016 with the House, the Senate, and a mandate from the American people to do things. Who prevented him from doing things? Because it wasn't the Democrats. He didn't need a single Democrat vote. It was the establishment Republicans. All these people giving money to Ron DeSantis, these were the ones. That's why we didn't get a wall. That's why we didn't get legislation passed, because the establishment Republicans didn't want to govern. They didn't want to put in place the things we sent them to do.
311 members of the House voted to expel George Santos this morning. They don't want to do anything.
Right. And so whether or not Ron DeSantis is going to do anything if he were to be elected president, I don't know. But right now, I don't think anybody gets money for free. And I'm thinking that if Ron DeSantis already has shown he is willing to back down like he backed down with Disney, what's going to happen when he gets Washington? It's going to be another do-nothing Republican president, House, and Senate, because even if we send him in with a majority, there's going to be a lot of talking and not a lot of doing.
And all things being equal, Donald Trump cannot be bought. He lost $1 billion while he was president. His net worth is at a point where he doesn't need outside money. Ron DeSantis can't say the same thing. And money, unfortunately, it's going to influence your decisions. If you need to raise money to campaign, you get to do the bidding of those donors.
Right. So anyways, folks, we welcome the comments. We appreciate people pushing back. Got a couple asks for you. One, share this content with people that you don't even agree with. We believe that we need freedom from the press. I guarantee you, people watching, even DeSantis supporters, you didn't know he backed down on Disney. You didn't know he put his donors in charge of Disney. You didn't know that he was fundraising for president before governor's race. And you didn't know that when they asked him about, is he running for president, he stood up there lying to you because he had already set it up, in my opinion. And that's why we do what we do. Why do I support President Trump? He is not part of that establishment. On the Democrat side or Republican side, they both hate him. They both want to destroy him. And anybody that is an enemy of the establishment is probably a friend of mine. So as much as President Trump does things that maybe sometimes I go, I don't know if I like that, I will take that 100% of the time. With that, Todd, what do you have for final thoughts?
You know, we might as well read it since we put it on there. But Jason, I just have the question. It's more rhetorical here. Ron DeSantis was never polling high against Donald Trump. He declared after Trump did. Right now, polling anywhere between 9 and 14%, and depends on the poll. In a given poll, Trump's average is plus 50. Ron DeSantis was never going to win the nomination. Now, things can change. I mean, look at Goldman's comment. Things can change, right, overnight. But assuming Trump does get the nomination, as he kind of was projected to, what was the point of DeSantis raising all that money, entering the race, just to kind of embarrass himself? He's really lost clout in the MAGA movement. And again, I'm not looking for an answer, but I'm just prompting this question for our audience here. You might like DeSantis, but what was the motivation to enter something you knew you had no chance of winning? And if you wanted to be the vice president, you're going to have a better chance of doing that just being a great governor in the state of Florida. There's no reason to go in a dogfight against Trump and all the other candidates in these debates and the campaign trail. So interesting decision. I'm not going to answer the question. I'm just going to observe that.
Yeah, and like I say, hopefully, if you're a DeSantis supporter, you probably still are. God love you. If you're a Trump supporter like us, like we are ride or die with President Trump because we think he's not part of that establishment. And as we go on for DeSantis folks who are supporting him, at some point, I hope you can open your eyes and you can look at what Ron DeSantis is really doing and see how the money gets sucked into him, because I fall for this all the time. We send somebody up to Washington. We think they're going to do the best thing ever. They're going to fight for the American people. And all of a sudden they get up there and they give these speeches and they have these hearings. And you're like, yeah, they're going to do it. And then at the end of the day, they do nothing. And if we send another Republican president, House, and Senate up to Washington, D.C., and it's 4 more years of that, folks, we need to turn this country around, and we can't afford for do-nothing Republicans, rhinos back in power.
Well said, Jason. And we are running over our time here. I know we had one more clip we wanted to get to. We might have to bring that back next week. But folks, this was a great show. I think this hour flew by. Really appreciate the busy comment section today. And again, we enjoy the back and forth. If you disagree, that is fine. Again, we're not trying to change your mind necessarily. Just want to give you all the facts to do what you're going to do with that. But really enjoyed everyone's participation today on the show. And Jason and I had a great time researching this, presenting this. And as always, if there's a topic you want us to explore, drop it in the comments and we'll take a look at it.
Awesome. Hey, folks, stay safe out there. And quick movie recommendation. If you are a Daily Wire subscriber, that their new comedy drops tonight. My wife and I, we've had plans to get takeout, and we're going to be watching that. So don't be looking for us this evening. That's where we'll be. Take care of yourself, and God bless everybody.
Have a great weekend. See you next week.